Hi everyone, my name is Miss Yunua Olabi and welcome to Testimony Corner. I believe that we indeed overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the words of our testimony. I've gone through seasons in life where I had to steward testimonies to create an atmosphere where I'm like, God, do it again. Because testimonies are prophetic words. They are, reminder of the goodness of God, celebrating the goodness of God and creating an atmosphere where God can do what? Do it again. So I call myself Testimony Hunter. Always looking for testimonies, always going over what God has done to remind myself of His goodness, to get me in a position of perpetually being joyful and to expect with joy what is set to do. So on this conversation is going to be happening a lot with different people, just sharing testimonies. And guess what? It's called testimonies for a reason. Test. So we're not just going to talk about the victories, we'll talk about the low moments, talk about how we navigate or how we are navigating or how we navigated seasons to birth testimonies. So trust me, if keeping it real is your thing, you're going to love this corner because we're going to be talking about test and the testimonies. And I'm excited about this one. A dear friend of mine, a pastor. Hey, the first time I met him, don't let me go into the first time I met him. Let me introduce him first. Then I'll tell you about the first time I met him. All right, guys. Welcome with me, Pastor Shago. I said I'm not going to say his surname. You're going to say your surname yourself.
All right.
Pastor Shago.
Ikuemonisan.
Yeah, what he said. Let's do that again.
Ikuemonisan.
Pastor Shago, put your hands together. Imagine you're an event. Put your hands together for Pastor Shago.
Ikuemonisan.
It sounds like an ad. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for doing this last minute, guys. Can I tell you something? We didn't see this coming, but God did. Glory to God. I'm always on it. I'm really excited about testimonies. I'm really excited about creating. So when I see an opportunity, I'm like, oh, let's take that. So just tell us a bit about yourself for those that don't know you. Yeah.
Okay, let me start by introducing the moment that I met PI for the first time. Not kind of meet. It's
The first time you saw me.
Saw you. So I was ministering at a conference in Unilag, and I remember there was a moment, and then there was a very, well-dressed, anointed-looking lady in front. She just yelled, and I was like, okay. I remember listening to the recording of the program later and hearing the yell at that point. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think what's been consistent with you is that unashamedness that with which you do what you do. That if it's worship, if it's the prayer meeting, it's authentic. That's not holding back.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know different things will be said of you by different people, but I just wanted to say that's something that strikes me about you.
Wow.
And I think that's something that everybody should be blessed by. That authenticity, that childlikeness.
Wow.
So.
No, I feel so. Oh my God! But man, first time someone's program. It has happened before. Wait, someone say, "Pierre, that's you right there. You are in church." Because I'm like, I remember one Thursday showers. Some people were watching online. My friend just buzzed, "Pierre, you are in church, right?" I said, "Yeah." Why? He said, "I just heard your voice."
So it's a trademark.
I try.
Bless God. But it is amazing to have people who are more about being authentic and real with God and God's people. And
I think after the last conference, I was asking my husband that I was just teasing like, man, you're never ashamed, because I honestly don't like even if I go and minister in a place that I don't know, if I get there and they honor the presence of God and there are people that it just feel like we're family. I am jumping, I'm laughing, I'm dancing. I remember when we said I think the man was just how maybe guest minister you one word. I was just all over.
It's a blessing.
All over, and I thank God for liberty. Honestly, I really bless God. So let's talk about you.
To answer the question,
Yeah.
My name is Shago Ikuemonisan one more time. I found favor with God. I think that's what sums everything up. We can talk about the different expressions, but I think the most important thing that, I want to sum this up as is, this is just God's goodness on display. And I remember, I think it was 2009, Nigerian Tribune interviewed me, and when it came out in papers, the heading was "The Seed of God Does Not Die."
Wow.
Basically, it's just, this is just God's seed. So, Shago Ikuemonisan, preacher, author, written songs, trained lawyer, but above everything else, I'm grateful to God for His goodness, and I'm called to speak to a generation as a connector between generations.
Wow,
basically.
Good. So you went to law school?
Yes, I did. Wow. VI, Lagos campus.
No, we need to talk about everything. So let's start. So for me, what intrigues me is to see, and I think, and guys, honestly, this is going to bless somebody watching, because I'm already sensing things. It's already happening.
Glory.
Let's talk about the early days, being a young child. We're going to see a clip in between this video. That's him. How you started ministering at what age again?
7.
You were hosting crusade at what age?
7.
What were the things that were happening in those crusades? I think I heard testimonies.
There
were workings of miracles?
Lots of it. We had healings every night. We had the dumb speak, the deaf hear. We had people who came with walking aids go back home without them. We had those kind of miracles. Yes, it's God's goodness.
Come on, let's talk about the LEDs.
I think diving in, the first thing I want to say is that many times when in the bid to steward testimony, we need to know what to look for. Many times people, because we really want to reproduce, we sometimes focus too much on the principles.
Come on.
Than the goodness of God.
So good.
And, so whatever you hear today, the pressure to reproduce should be dwarfed by the goodness of God, the kindness of God. And the reason I'm saying this is that everywhere I go, Nigeria, outside every country I've been, I meet people who used to live in Nigeria, encountered the ministry, and some of them, their first reaction is, "You are the kid that got me flogged by my parents," because my parents couldn't stop talking about this boy that's your age mate, that's preaching, and what are you doing with your life? And I got lots of spanking. So I am a serial apologizer. I've had to apologize again and again and again.
Wow.
And I understand where it's coming from. That's why I put that disclaimer out there. The passion to see God do it again sometimes makes us to focus on what did the person do. The most important thing is, what did God do?
Please just allow on that. And I say that because I was teaching recently, and I said, a lot of times we talk about how Moses did not go to the mountain with the plan to be there for 40 days.
Yeah.
He was looking for God. He just wanted to spend time with God. So a lot of times when we even think that we can kickstart revival, I think that in itself, what you can do is continue to pursue God, be hungry for God, be available for what God wants to do, and then He will do it again. Yeah. He's not doing it again because you're trying to repeat principles. I love that. When you're stewarding testimonies, you look up for what did God do. Right? Yeah. Why you celebrate the person, learn 1 or 2 things from it, but the focus first is not the person did this, then God came along. Yeah. No, God and the person. Because I always say that, who are we to even respond to God if not for the nudging of God in our hearts? So that is so good. Before we say, 40. So now we want to do 40. Was it 40? No, it's not. We want to do the byproduct of people's encounters, but getting that what we are seeing is as a result of being with God. So I'm just gonna take that everywhere I go now. Just absolutely. That's so good. Go ahead, please.
And I'm happy to burst people's bubbles. It didn't start with some soundtrack playing in the background in the morning. It was an ordinary day. Didn't see it coming. I mean, woke up one day in the morning, slept a different person at night.
Wow.
Didn't even know the full impact of what had started when it started. There's a background to that, but I'm going to start with the first time I got to preach and the circumstances around it. I was playing football. It was the national convention of the church that I grew up in, and that's where everything started. It's the Gospel Faith Mission International. So it was the annual convention. That evening was dedicated to the children ministry. I will not say that I thought of myself as an integral part of the children ministry, except that I would attend the children's church. So nothing prepared me for that. Apparently, the presentation that was supposed to take place, the person that was supposed to preach, for some reason was not found.
Wow.
And so the coordinator walked up to me. I'd known my parents. My parents are ministers, both of them. Known my parents. So he walked up to me. I was drenching in sweat from playing football. And then he said to me, "Shago, would you be able to preach tonight?" And I think that's God's orchestration. I mean,
you can't plan these things.
Never. And the child, like, I was a child. I felt, my parents preach, what's the big deal? I mean, one of the things I say is this: if God gave me enough time to be exposed to this thing before He said to me, I want to use you, He would never have had my cooperation. I mean, it is God's wisdom that God ambushed me early, So I didn't have enough time to process everything. I just said, yes, of course. So I went home, had a cool shower. I remember the jacket I wore that evening. It was a green corduroy jacket. And I went to stand before, this multitude. I can't remember a thing I said. But I remember that people did not stop talking about such atmosphere while I was talking. I remember lots of people got saved that night. But that's all I remember. I can't remember the things I said, but I remember people talking about the atmosphere, just that presence of God while I was speaking. And yes, that's what I would say. I would say that God has been kind. Even before this happened, I got born again at 5. My mother preached to me. I got born again at 5. I remember that people would talk about that in school, the teachers would come and ask me to pray for the sick. I started from praying for my classmates to praying for the teachers. Yes, 5, 6, all of that was happening. So they would just say, come and pray. So I graduated from praying for my classmates to praying for the teachers. Something must have been working for them to be saying, pray here and there. Wow. So I think God left something on me early. That's what I would say. So that's where it began from. Went back home like it was normal, but I kept playing back. What happened? And then my first crusade was, I think, months later, in a place called Ilogbo, Ekiti State now. So a 21-day crusade was running. The first 14 days was about to end. So the same coordinator that sent for me for that first opportunity to preach sent for me to come and conclude the last 7 days.
Sorry, who is this person?
Reverend Amos Adewale Owoseni. He's one of the...
Is that your spiritual father?
He began all of this. I still honor him deeply as my mentor.
Okay, so you mean the man just is a member of the church that asked you that time?
Yes.
So afterwards now
heads the children.
He heads it. Oh wow. So they now called you to come to this AKT.
Yeah.
Right, please go ahead. Wow.
And now the difference between the first one was that it was, the children. No, it was the international convention and it was the children presentation segment. This one was different. It was all the churches had gathered together for that crusade. So it wasn't same as that one. What I'm saying is I wasn't ready for what I walked into. He had sent this person to come and pick me. My parents prepared me, set me on the road. I got to Ilogbo Ekiti. And the first night, I saw this massive crowd. Everybody, all the churches were gathered together. So it was supposed to be the climax of the 21 days crusade. And then, I'll be honest with you, I'd not learned how to prepare to preach. So it wasn't any skill set that I had. I didn't know how to look for the scriptures. I'm deliberate about saying these details so that, the myths are shattered.
Yes, of what it made you. It was something you did.
Yeah. So what I used, this is the first time I'm going to say this. The back of Gideon's International Bible.
Wow. Yeah.
There were scriptures about salvation, those things that he put. I preached from one each night. I would use that as my central. So it wasn't like I had perfect sermons, but beyond that, there was something God had placed upon me, and there was something happening every night. There were healings, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself, but I remember the night that everything shifted. I was supposed to preach, but all the activities before the word were going on, and the cloud was thick, heavy. I don't know how the adults could pretend like the crusade wasn't threatened. Like they were nervous, but they were doing their best to conceal it because the cloud it wasn't like maybe not. It was sure to rain. Everything was looking bleak. And then I got the microphone, and I don't know where the audacity came from. And I said, tonight it will not rain. And I could see some adults giggle like, okay, yes, we get this child innocence, we understand. But, God wasn't joking. And I believe not less than 2 minutes after tiny hands, it's not going to rain tonight and everything. Not less than 2 minutes. Everything supernaturally cleared. Like there was no trace or hint that it was going to rain. And we had massive miracles that night. And let me add this. I believe it was like 7 years after the crusade, I met someone who was there at that time, who said to me that, do I know that after we finished the crusade and I left, like the primary herbalist, if you're not in Africa, you will not be able to relate. Herbalists are spiritists who conjure, and all of those things. It's not just herbs.
Not just herbs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like the principality in that area, came to the location of the crusade and, asked them, who stopped my rain?
Wow.
So apparently the guy was in the business of, he will wait for you to print your posters, announce, gather the people, but he would decide when the crusade ends. That was his thing. So he asked who stopped, and he said he was a boy of 7 years that preached and prayed, and the guy told me that the man was so humbled that was the day he gave his life to Jesus.
Glory to God.
And guess what? 7 days after, he died.
Wow.
Yeah. I will hold that very dear to my heart forever. So that's how it began.
So how did you continue school with all of these things? How did you deal with family? How did you remain level-headed, if you were level-headed?
So I wasn't ready. I'll be sincere with you. I wasn't ready for the intensity and the implications of what was happening in my life. It was just happening. But thank God for my parents. First of all, they are people deeply rooted in God's word. Secondly, I think I should say this at this point. I'd gone about 2 years into this experience that I'm talking about, just this child preaching and all of that. And that was when my mom sat me down one day. I think I was about 9 when she sat me down and said, actually, it's time to tell you something. That around the time you were conceived, it was a season of intense prayers. We were praying every night, vigil, from night to morning. And one of those nights, the Lord visited us. And she, I still get that awe of God's presence because she was vivid in how she described the encounters. And I saw those things happen, with my parents growing up. So I know the intensity she was describing. And the Lord said to them, the baby you're carrying is a male child. This is his name, so and so and so. Things are the instructions when he's born. This and this will be the sequence of how things will go, And, I think what the Lord said to them, have I ever said this in public? Should I?
Right. That's why it's called the testimony corner.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think what the Lord said to them was that he would serve at the altar like his father. And so the interpretation my parents had put on it was that, I would grow to a point where I would be drawn to ministry, and then I will be, another minister, either supporting my father or ministering like my father. So when all of this began to play out, it was beyond the control of anyone. It didn't play like they had interpreted that a prophecy would play. So the fact that they knew ahead of time puts a lot of context to it for them. And I think it helped them not to fight what was happening or to be overprotective. So I was like that child that was let go early. And it also helped me to keep me grounded. And so my parents also, my dad was a lecturer before, he resigned to focus. So there's that value for education. So, we would talk and it was like, whatever you do, just make sure that you don't stop schooling. So that was it for him. And it's interesting, majority of those early ministrations, my parents didn't know what was happening. They were just hearing.
Oh,
they were not in all the meetings.
Whoa.
I remember the first time that I was...
That's one that they called you in your church, they were there.
They were, the annual convention, that first one, they were there because it was the first time.
Yeah.
But the subsequent, like the Lobo Crusade, of course, and then the subsequent invitations to minister here and there, they were just here. Until one day my dad, was in the meeting and, I couldn't handle the reaction on his face. Like, okay, so this is what it is. Yeah, but I'm grateful to God that they helped me to be balanced and grounded. I wasn't so much of the sacred kid in the house. I was well managed. So it helped me, yes, I had to compensate for when I was away traveling when I come back to school. And I still did very well academically, I believe. Yeah. So, wow. Yeah.
Guys, we'll be right back. Let us quickly take a quick look at what it looked like when I was preaching at that age. We'll be back.
The continent of Africa has seen many great moves of God. During the mid-80s, there was a unique move of God in Nigeria as the hand of God was upon young children to preach the gospel in the power of the Holy Ghost. It was around this time that the Lord raised Shago Ikuemonisan, who was said to be the youngest evangelist of that period. At the age of 7, he began to travel the country to preach at massive crusades. Various cities in Nigeria hosted the city-wide crusades, which were called Victory Crusades. This wave soon spread to other countries in Africa, and at this time, thousands of people were gathering to listen to him minister in the power of the Holy Ghost.
Wow, welcome back. I'm here with Pastor Shago. Your son, him?
Ikuemonisan. I was wondering.
What's going on? Yeah. I mean, if you're just joining us, we need to share this link, showing how he started ministry at the age of 7. I mean, this is not just ministry of your children's church with Eden Crusade and all. How long did that go for? How long did you do that for? I want to talk about the seasons and stages now. When did you have the first break? Where there was, It
went up until, I would say it went on for like 8 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, we kept doing crusades. 5, 6, 7, 8 years. That was my life. Every month I was here, there. There were times that I would be in a country for a whole month.
When you went to school?
I would make up for it when I'm back.
Wow.
Yeah.
So who was your guide and who was traveling with you?
Reverend Segun.
Wow, bless him. Bless him.
Is
he still alive?
He is.
Amazing. God bless you, Reverend Amos, right? That's his name?
Yes, Owusheni.
Yeah, you see the surname. Thank you so much. So let's talk about that. This is funny, but this reminded me of some of the guys that happened in Hollywood. It's almost the same thing as you, that they discover their gifts, but they're exploited.
Yeah, I understand.
Some of the woods or any of the woods. Yeah. And so what will you say to people that have young people that God, thank you, Holy Spirit, God has entrusted a kind of child. All children are special, but there's some children that the Lord has given a mandate for a generation, right? Out of His divine wisdom and selection. What will you say to parents that are to parent such children peculiar as yours?
I think I will speak to parents. I will speak to, apart from parents, custodians in that sense, or guardians, people like maybe church leadership or children ministry leadership. For parents, I think this whole generational gap many times creates a huge problem. Parents, the wiring is to protect.
Yeah.
So finding that balance of when to protect and when to release is something that has to be done by the Spirit. If you follow your feelings, you're going to kill something that will never, God's mercy prevails over that. But it will be difficult for the person to get back in that place. And you see, and it happens every time, Saul was protecting, Jesse was protecting David from battle. Saul was protecting David from battle. He stepped forward, he said, I'm going to, and there's that sincere thing that you have that can shut down the gifting of God, because you've seen enough of life to be aware of potential danger, the implications, and sometimes you want to just shut it down.
Protect.
Protect. But there's a safe place for that, but there's also the extreme, and one has to be very careful to be by the Spirit. On the other hand, there are people who merchandise it, and it becomes a business. And that's one of the things my parents were deliberate about. There was a pull here and there to put more material about me out there. There were people requesting for the details of what God said to them because it will sell. And my parents said, we won't put that out.
Wow.
Yeah, we will not allow that.
I want to talk about that, especially in the age where we are, where it feels like we unconsciously, we're beginning to use the gift as a marketing, we're using the giftings. How do you balance it? How do you know when it's turning into a marketing scheme and all of that?
For a child, it may be difficult because you trust the people that you're entrusted to. In that sense, you have to have walked some measure of life to be able to discern that this is switching. For a child, you just do what you're told to do.
It's really on the onus of the parents and the custodian.
Yeah,
for children.
Basically. So I'll speak to that in terms of the person managing. Let your intentions be sincere. I remember that Reverend Segun, amazing man of God. I mean, one of the things he did for me was not just to put me out there, but he made me comfortable with my calling.
Wow.
I was a child, but he related with me in a way that made me at home with the uniqueness.
So it honored you as well.
I'm telling you, there were conversations he would have with me as an adult. He would just relate with me like a contemporary.
Wow.
And he did something for me, And there were temptations. I mean, we went to Ghana, and, people were selling the pictures everywhere. I mean, but there was a discipline to keep it about what it's about, And it's, the other thing is also this thing that I would call peer pressure. But I'll say it from this angle. Peer pressure is not just the pressure applied by your peers on you as a young person. Peer pressure is also the pressure applied by those you look up to say, look at your peer. And that kind of happened at some point where they held me as a model and said, this is what you should be. And then there was a lot of, let's mass produce this. Let's, reproduce this. And it got people under pressure. So there's this other pressure that's mounted, the peer pressure that's mounted by parents, guardians, custodians on the children when they hold up a sample and say, everybody be like this.
Wow.
And it puts a lot of pressure that tampers with what God wants to do. I remember there are many people who, of course, succumbed to the pressure and got in the whole thing, and then
they started preaching.
But I look back and I realized that after a while, because it wasn't organic, a lot of them, just stepped back, either found other paths or just lost interest entirely. And this is what it is. It is possible that it was in God's plan for them to be in ministry eventually. However, because the will of man tampered with it, and pressure came in, something happened to that fragile seed.
Wow.
So I believe that it is actually something that we should pay attention to, how we steward the giftings of God, especially those who begin to sprout early. The balance of not overprotecting, not merchandising, and not making them a pressure picture, and try to say everybody has to, just that willingness, discernment, and wisdom to step back and just cooperate with God.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. So let's talk about seasons. So that happened for 5-7 years. What happened?
So Reverend Segun traveled to the US, and there was a season where we couldn't be together. And because it was easier for me to minister, when I'm in his company, because of the trust, I couldn't travel alone. So it reduced significantly the invitations I could take. And things just began to change. That was what was playing out on the natural. It would take years after for me to understand that God was doing something. So, there were doors that gradually began to, just shut. I remember one particularly. I had, quite a blast in Ghana. The following year, the national platform. There was something, all the teenagers in Ghana were gathering together for a meeting, and I was supposed to be the guest minister. And guess what? I got the invitation letter months after the event had held. And imagine what nonsense. That, but that was the season where God was doing something. My flesh was fighting it.
Wow, come on.
Because it had implications I wasn't ready for.
All right, guys. So we're going to go on a quick break. And when I'm back, I'm going to continue my conversation. This amazing conversation with Pastor Shago.
Ikuemonisan.
Yeah!
That is it.
See you guys.